Can we talk about voice as in like certain people voices?
Are you going to talk about Tyler Joseph?
Were you asking that seriously or jokingly?
Jokingly, but I'm also genuinely interested.
I am going to be talking about Tyler Joseph.
Okay. Now I'm faking surprise.
Hey everybody. I'm Macy.
This is Scott.
And this is No Small Thing. Welcome.
Okay, so I want to say, I didn't realize this before we did this, but I was listening last week, and the reason I was thrown off by our greeting was because I don't say, hey everybody, it's Scott. I don't say that. I say, hey everybody, welcome to No Small Thing. I'm Scott.
Oh.
That's why it felt weird last week. And I just realized that right now as we did it. I was like, wait.
Oh, well,
yeah.
Welcome to No Small Thing.
I'm Scott.
I'm Macy. Now we have it.
Yeah, because last week I said, hey, everybody, it's Scott. That felt so weird.
Well, when you're a podcast host, people know your name, I guess.
Yeah.
I feel like
Scott.
We should explain No Small Thing where we think that everything is interesting and nothing is too small to not have a conversation. And
that is a practice tagline. We're working on a tagline / mission statement. And that's the essence of it. The essence.
Also, you sent a text recently that was something about like pausing and like looking at the beauty in the small things.
Whoa.
I forget what it was. Yeah, you said this could be a tagline. Yeah, it was good. So I liked that. So that's what No Small Thing's about. And today's episode is going to be on something that is really no small thing.
It's about curiosity. I think that's a tag word. That's an important word for us.
Oh, that is a tag word. That's not our topic of today.
No, I know. Yeah, I know. That sounds confusing. Today we're going to talk about the concept of voice. And if that sounds intriguing, keep listening.
Yeah.
We're just as intrigued as you are because we don't know what we're going to say.
No, we have really danced around this topic.
But we have some announcements, and we're going to try to keep them short.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they're announcements.
They're announcements as well as
some preliminary comments.
Some preliminary notes, I think. First of all, thank you for listening. If you're listening to us, you've probably found us in one of our ways you can listen to podcasts, but we'll reiterate that you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play. We're
Stitcher.
on Google Play now, Stitcher, and SoundCloud.
Yeah.
So all those places where you could be listening to us, and soon we'll be on, I think, Spotify and Overcast.
Any listener out there, we are grateful. Thank you.
We're thankful for you listening. We wanted to share.
We're not cocky and arrogant about this. We're really grateful.
Did people think we are?
Maybe I'm just paranoid. I want people to know how much I appreciate it. I'm like,
we really appreciate it, and because we want to read some reviews that people wrote us. Because it means a whole lot to us. And that is one of the best ways that you can, as a listener, appreciate the podcast is by rating and reviewing. I was listening to a podcast.
On iTunes, right?
On iTunes, or I think on other places.
Like I don't know how to rate on Google or Stitcher, but if you listen, whatever platform you listen on, maybe, rate.
Yeah, and subscribe. Subscribing is very
if you
helpful.
listen on SoundCloud, subscribe, I think. It's subscribe or like or something. I don't know. But
yeah, I think it's subscribing and liking.
I think we have 8 SoundCloud subscribers.
Yeah,
so
something
that's nice.
like that.
Thanks, SoundCloud subscribers. Subscribers.
We appreciate it. It's really no small thing to us. I love that catchphrase. Okay, so should we read some reviews?
Yeah. You want to start?
Yeah.
You want to start with Reuven?
You should read that one.
Okay, I'm going to start with Reuven, my fellow 5-wing 4. He's in Indonesia right now, and we miss him. He lives in this house.
He does.
And he hasn't been here. Hi, Reuven. We have big plans for Reuven when he comes back.
Yeah.
We have an idea where we would have installments every once in a while where we'd have a part of the podcast called Reuven's Ruminations.
Yeah.
And it would just be Reuven talking about whatever he's passionate about. And we're just hoping he's on board with it. It's just our idea. But he says this. First of all, he gave us 5 stars.
Thank you,
So
Reuven.
let's just let that be a something. And he says this. I usually don't listen to podcasts, and I don't listen to this one either. A great podcast, nonetheless. I love that. It might be my favorite review. Thank you, Reuven.
Scott loves that review.
I love that review.
Okay, the next one is from Lena Lee, who is Justin, who we read earlier. Like
he wrote a review.
He wrote a review. So shout out to Justin. He wrote a review, and then his wife wrote this review, and she said, "Didn't want to stop listening. You guys are doing a great job. I really like the combination of intellectual stimulation, appreciation of aesthetics."
Jeez.
Yes, and a relaxed atmosphere of your discussions.
So
I
good.
like
all the things
the
we want to hear.
and relaxed atmosphere comment.
It's just really true that people are picking up on our vibe.
Yes.
You know, like that's great. If somebody was like, I love the boring, slow pace of your conversations. It's so slow. I'd be like, wait, but they're not. I'd be like, they're missing it. You know, like, what?
I love the boring.
I don't know. I'm just trying to think of like what could be said where it would convey that they're missing it. Like, that's not what we're trying to do. But we are trying to do this.
Yeah.
You know?
What could someone say that would be a compliment? But
we're trying to be a compliment, but missing us.
But be missing us.
Yeah. I don't know.
Or something like, oh, love this. Like, help me to not think about anything.
Oh,
just,
yeah.
Like, let me zone out.
Or, love this made my perspective so much more solidified. I don't have to ever think again. You know, I'd be like, wait, what? That's not what we're trying to do. I figured this problem out once and for all. The topic is settled. Okay, so I read the next one.
Yeah.
I like these titles. If you're gonna write a review,
you have to give a title.
Let me just say, let me do a challenge to any listener. Okay, so theoretically, we have about 50. We have 50 ratings, and then like I don't know how many reviews, like 15, 20 reviews, and so theoretically, there's up to there's a lot of people listening. There's more than this. So so accept this challenge. Write a review, and then do like a creative title. Because look at these titles. Reuven's is what a podcast. The next one is great. This next one is wow. There's other ones like The Rants, Great Curious Podcast, We Need This, Real Conversation.
Okay, wait, your brothers? A Cure for Cynicism
that
is
might be
the
my
best
favorite.
one.
That's huge. Thank you, Shane, my brother.
Yeah.
A Cure for Cynicism. So
That's like the sound of a song or an album.
And Reuven, here's the thing about Reuven. He almost took me up on a past challenge, I think. Because I said, give us 5 stars and write a bad review. Because we'll get the 5 stars. The bad review the words aren't going to hurt us. And then it would be funny. So he didn't give us a bad review. He gave us 5 stars. So we get the 5 stars, and then we get a mild roast. And I like that.
That's such an accurate description of it.
I guess people took me up on that. So
he didn't really say anything bad. Just like, this is a podcast.
Yeah.
I don't listen. It's good.
But I don't even think that's true. I think he listens, but it's fine if he doesn't. But I would say come up with a creative title that's almost like a subtle roast or something. I don't know. Have fun with it.
Subtle roast.
It's a title challenge. It's a title challenge. Okay, this next one, the title is Wow. This is Cassie Smiley Face, but it's Cassie spelled with a CA55IE.
I love it.
Very creative. This podcast is so much fun to listen to and so wholesome. That's another key word for us.
We love the word wholesome.
The hosts are truly passionate about what they talk about. I enjoy listening to this podcast as I draw or bake. Perfect.
I know.
Thing to do during podcast. And then I can't wait to see how this grows.
Perfect thing to do while listening to a podcast.
It is. Bake or
what do you do while you listen to No
bake.
Small Thing?
Yeah.
Tag us in your photos.
I typically, if I'm listening to a podcast, I'm typically in the car or doing chores in my house with my headphones in. Chores.
Yeah. I probably doing different things around the house. I'll paint. I'll walk. I listen to podcasts a lot.
While you're doing yoga?
No. No yoga for me. Maybe one day.
Okay, so there, rate and review, everybody, and then we also want to talk about Patreon.
Yeah, okay, review and thank you guys for
rating that
and accept our challenge.
Thank you to the Beatty family.
True.
I think they're the only couple that have both reviewed. Call out to couples that both need to review. Don't just send one couple.
Oh my gosh, get your whole family involved.
Get your kids.
Call
Everybody
your grandma up.
Okay, do you want to talk about Patreon?
Sure, we're on Patreon. That's all there really is to say, except for that we're on Patreon. If you don't know what Patreon is, it's a way for people who are like, I don't know, beginning to do something creative to like pool financial support from people who believe in that thing, I guess. Mm-hmm. So you can become a patron. And basically, you can become a patron to no small thing. And there we have like a ton of different tiers. You can do a $1 level, $3 level, $5 level. You'll all get bonus content if you are a Patreon supporter, because it's no small thing that you would support us. So we have some gifts, I guess. So you'll get like
gifts like those images on the internet.
No, gifts.
Oh.
Gifts in the form of we could get some gifs. We could maybe get some gifs on our Patreon page if we would like. I can do that.
Matthew made a face. No. Can't do that. Is it GIF
or GIF?
I think so. That's why I thought it was funny that Macy said gifts.
Gifts. You could get the gift of ASMR in your ears every week.
Bam.
As well as
listening
probably
party for your
bonus
every week.
Things.
A new listening party for your every week.
That would be that would have to be my full-time job.
I know. That was a big one. Big creative feat.
There was something else to say about Patreon.
Well, I'll say something about Patreon. And here, I haven't talked to you about this, but
okay.
I have this sort of background goal of doing like a pilot part 2 or like an episode on our 20th episode. Mm-hmm. Where we just spend the whole episode evaluating, looking back, and looking forward. And then it would be like really explaining where we're at in terms of what we want to do. So the Patreon thing supports some immediate, in heavy quotes, needs.
Yeah.
In heavy quotes. Like, it would be nice to have nicer microphones. Especially for Macy's ASMR. Like, we can do a podcast. Our podcast doesn't sound bad. These microphones are fine. But if you want nice ASMR, you got to get a fancy microphone.
But before we do microphones, I think we'd want to do subscription fees for like Spotify and stuff.
Yeah, things like that. Little things. Like there's some basic bottom line things that we want to make sure we cover.
Yeah.
And then heading out from there, like, the possibilities are endless, and I think we both have like big dreams, and so
big dreams.
To articulate that, and then to invite people to support us on Patreon to help make those things happen is pretty cool.
Yeah, so I guess that's something to look forward to as a listener. I guess our 20th episode, maybe.
Yeah, I think 20th episode, but we'll see.
20th is supposed to be an Enneagram episode.
Oh, maybe it'll be 21 or 19 then.
Okay.
I want to stick to that commitment.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
In theory, it would be a Enneagram 2 episode.
Yeah. So I guess look forward to that, audience.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have Katie Thomas on.
Yeah. Okay, should we talk about voice?
I think that those are the things we just wanted to get out of the way and clue you guys into. And when we come back, we're going to start our topic for the night, which is voice. And we're looking forward to talking about that with you when we come back. So, okay, we're going to invite everybody, including ourselves, right here and now, to just freeze frame that word in your head, voice. And think about what it means to you. Think about all of the connotations and implications. Think about it personally. Think about macro, micro, coming in, coming out, you thinking, listening to voices. This is what we're trying to deal with here. And now we're going to try to start somewhere. We're going to have a starting point to this conversation. And that's where you and I are both a little bit like, where does it start?
Where does it start? Because it feels so broad.
Mm-hmm. And I have an idea, but do you want to start it or?
No, I think you should say your idea. I'm still a little bit stuck on where it starts.
Okay, here's where I want to start, and then maybe we'll see how you respond. I was proposing that we start with thinking about the concept of voice through sort of the spirit of the Enneagram. One of the core tenets, beliefs, principles, underlying, elements of the Enneagram is this idea of essence. And every teacher has a different way of talking about it. But it's one of the words that the wisdom of the Enneagram uses as sort of a primary reference point.
Yeah.
So essence is essentially, this is my shorthand way of describing it in real time, is sort of our purity, our the essential nature of our true identity, and how we come into the world innocent, pure. I wouldn't say, for lack of a better word, fine.
Like visually, it's
good, wholesome.
It feel like, I think of essence visually as like this like glowing within, like it's like a light within. Essence is like, I don't know. It feels like it's a glow.
I love that. So a glow.
So glow.
So thinking about spiritually and psychologically, like it seems to me as a lay psychologist, I'm not a psychologist, but from what I've learned and understood is part of our problem as humans is that we do tend to look at each other as humans with these black and white dualities. And so we're always putting people through our filters, and we're saying, that's a bad person, that's a bad trait, that's a good trait, I like this, I don't like that, instead of just saying, actually, we're all good. Here's a really rogue example. This is like an example of like how Macy and I don't know what we're talking about. Like, I saw a Facebook post like 5 years ago that still irks me to this day. And it was like, if anybody knows anything about hats, there's new era hats. And everybody knows like sort of the cool, proper, maybe even hip hop way to wear a new era hat is to keep the bill flat and to keep the stickers on.
Oh,
and in some ways, which I think is coming back, in the 90s when I was like in middle school, it was cool to keep the tags on.
Oh,
like you walked around with the tags on your hat. And I remember this post from a friend of mine back in high school that was like, just did this rant. And it was like posted a picture of like kind of a baseball cap with the bill folded down. And he was like, here's the right way to wear the hat. Here's the wrong way, flat bill stickers. You take the stickers off, you fold the bill. That's the right way to wear a hat. That's kind of what I'm talking about to a certain extent. It's like we're judging people that way. Here's what a good person looks like. Here's what a good song sounds like. Here's what a good opinion sounds like.
Yeah.
Instead of just taking each other as these beautiful people that we are at face value. So let me just say, think about voice on two levels on a starting point. We come into the world with our literal voice, with our vocal cords.
Yeah.
And that's a good voice.
Yeah.
And then let's just have that progress into the realm of singing and how we like say, here's how you sing.
Yeah.
And we all know, Macy and I know especially, and others in our tribe, that there are different ways of singing. And the more interesting the voice, like Joanna Newsom.
Oh.
She doesn't sing like a person that would win on American Idol. You know what I mean? So everybody has their own voice that they need to find a way to get out there.
An angelic elf woman.
Yeah, angelic elf woman. But then we also come into the world as we develop with a perspective. And that's almost, if anybody wants to get some sort of bearing on what we're talking about, almost thinking of the word voice as perspective. Like it's our perspective. It's our lens.
Yeah.
It's the thing that we're articulating to the world. Like we use our vocal cords. Yeah. What?
I want to see what Avery's quote was.
Macy had a friend.
Good.
So you see, this is what I'm saying. You did it with your friend. You did this with Avery. It'd have been good to do this with the Instagram community.
Oh, yeah. I asked her what voice was, and she said, what you use to be who you are. What you use to be who you are.
Thank you, Avery.
That's such a good
And there was another one too, wasn't there?
Yeah. How you choose to represent yourself.
How you choose to represent yourself. So
there's like a conceptual level to voice.
Go on a journey with us, everybody. We don't know what this means. We're talking about it. Voice is no small thing.
Because voice is not just, it's your human voice, like the sounds, sounds.
ASMR.
It makes me think of what's her name? The person you put on the mix. The very first mix you made me.
Oh, Bjork?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In her very beginning interview, she's talking about sounds and noises, and I just make these noises. And it's so voice is on some level just like the literal what we hear. Like the sound waves, the voice.
Yeah.
But then voice is also
What, can you read it again? What was the last one Avery said?
The last one Avery said.
The way we choose to...
How you choose to represent yourself.
How you choose to represent yourself. Okay, so I want to use that. Your literal vocal cords and how you use those, that's your voice. And also how you choose to represent yourself. And I would say perspective. These are the things we have been given to toy around with tonight.
Yeah, it brings an interesting discussion too of like voice. Yeah, and how you choose to represent yourself. Because it isn't like a person has a voice even if they may not be able to actually audibly like make a noise. Mm-hmm. They still like possess voice.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Yeah. Excellent point. Important point. And the next step was to think about this idea that I don't even know. Well, I guess I'm interested to hear your perspective.
About?
Well, this thought is like, however you want to use the word calling, mm-hmm. to think that we're all called for a purpose. We all have a role in this world, a part to play.
Yeah.
We all have a voice, not just to lend the world for the sake of fun and entertainment, but for the sake of building a better world. And every voice is important and essential, I think.
Yeah, I think that, like, well, first of all, scientifically, every voice is specifically unique. Mm-hmm. Like, it sounds incredible, like, in its own way unique. I don't know. A voice is interesting because people are like, well, you don't want someone's voice to be too strong, and maybe they may be, like, not in, like, a good place, or, like, they may misuse their voice. But at the end of the day, I also just think that everyone's voice matters and has some validity.
Yeah. In terms of every voice matters. I guess maybe I would say as like a white man living in the world, you know, a middle-class white man. I feel like it's my sort of quote-unquote calling to make space.
Yeah.
In whatever way I can. It's not that I'm not supposed to necessarily minimize my voice or not use my voice, but the way I use my voice is precarious. You know, like I shouldn't be forcing my voice around in the world. There are other people that actually probably should be forcing a little bit more. Mm-hmm. So I guess right now we're sort of in the perspective realm right now, not necessarily like singing or how we use our voice.
Oh yeah, I guess.
We'll come back and forth. But like this is a thought that came to my head. It's a memory, and it's weird that I even bring this up, but like, again, I've said this on the podcast. I've like looked something up, but like look this up because it's profound. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's one of those rare moments, especially in our culture now. Holy cow, with like Donald Trump, where you're like sort of inspired and proud of a white man. This like really happens. But like, it was here in Seattle, and Bernie Sanders was doing a rally, and these women from Black Lives Matter interrupt his speech. And it's just every moment is worth dissecting because Bernie Sanders is about to come up and he's got like his guy that's introducing him. So these two black women come up very powerful, wearing Black Lives Matter t-shirts, kind of chanting and sort of try to grab the mic from this other white man that's introducing Bernie Sanders. And he keeps holding onto his podium mic very hard. And he keeps saying, after Mr. Sanders, after Mr. Sanders. And that's in itself an interesting moment, you know?
Yeah, you could dissect that whole thing.
Yes. And they're just not having it. They're like, no, not after Mr. Sanders. So they eventually get control of the microphone. And Bernie very aggressively folds his arms and stands in the background and gestures to them like, the mic is yours. You know, like, I'm stepping back. I'm not going to fight you. And he very much not only gives them all the space in the world, but afterwards when he's interviewed, he's like, it's important that we listen to those voices. This is the whole point of my campaign. Like, we heard what we needed to hear today, you know? And that's just a great example. I mean, I'm not like saying celebrate the white man here, you know, it's because honestly, at the end of the day, it's the least he could do. But it's such a rare gesture. It's something that you want to point to other white people and white men in particular and say, here's an example of what it would look like. Yeah. Because I think sometimes they don't even know what you're talking about.
This just makes me think of, so today at work, so I have a new job, and I'm working at like the world's coolest preschool. It's so cool. And this one person was giving a report today about her trip to New Zealand, where she was learning about how they're doing immersion curriculum on pre-elementary, like young childhood teaching, and how we're doing it in New Zealand, and for years and years and years, the curriculum had been all English-based, and it had been, like, European-based, basically. And the country as a whole, like, decided that like what they had done to, I forget the name of the indigenous people in New Zealand. I only heard the presentation for like a half hour.
It's not like Aborigine?
No, it starts
That's
with an
Australia.
M. It starts with an M. But anyways, basically the country decided that they had like through colonization destroyed the voices of this indigenous people, and the only way to like really restore it was through reparations and then through education. And so as a country, their like initiative is to like teach that language and like give a voice to the indigenous people. Like as like a country, they're starting to like do that work. And we as like a staff, then later we're talking about we're having having conversations about anti-bias. We were having discussions about how we can best hear all the voices of the people in our community. And like that was our staff discussion today.
Honestly though, even as we're saying this is like another part of our mission statement.
Yeah.
I'm feeling pretty like electrified by that.
Yeah, it was super special. And we talked, we talked about this.
It's a skill.
It's really a skill. It's something that, first of all, I don't know if we're really gonna talk about this, but like, if you didn't know this, it is an unconscious thing that men talk in a table discussion, or their voices are a lot more prominent in most like discussions.
Talk about it.
They're like, that's just like the reality that we live in, and for a long time, anyone who wasn't a white male wasn't invited to the conversation.
And that's passed down.
Yeah, and like if you like look back at conversations, I probably could go find studies and post it, but like women get interrupted like significantly more in conversations and like talked over. And so like in our classes, in one of my classes of reconciliation, men were taught to like, if you see that happening, say something. Like, oh, this person over there was trying to say something. Like to point it out and not just like let it happen. Because women are on some essential trained by example that they don't have a voice because for so long it's not modeled. So huge.
And that just brings up even just you and my relationship. I feel like we're both interrupters.
Yeah,
but we talked about this, that we don't mind the interrupting.
Yeah.
But I still have to work on interrupting.
Well, I think first of all, it depends on the kind of conversation. Like when I'm thinking of a classroom setting, I know that I'm significantly more scared to speak than in a normal conversation in a classroom. And like I didn't understand what it was for so long, but specifically like especially in like theology in classes, I was like, I don't even know if I should belong in this classroom, so I probably shouldn't say anything. And then I would because I'm a verbal processor and had to, but it's really like rare. There's a lot of statistics also about that. Women in classrooms don't typically participate, which they're missing out on participation because they, I don't know, don't feel safe, maybe don't trust their voice. It's not modeled. A lot of things.
Yeah, a lot of things.
It's a bummer.
See, this
because
is
we're
the
all
interesting
missing
thing.
out.
I didn't even know we were going to be talking about this. Now we're on a really intriguing topic. I just remember at the end of one of my seminary classes, one of my professors, Charlie Scalise. Shout out, Charlie Scalise.
Shout out. We're just giving all the shout outs.
You know, this is even as I'm about to say this, I'm like, probably this is the implicit bias thing, which is why I'd love to have an episode on this. We're so trained to, look up or make heroes of the people that look like us. So it's in my sort of subconscious best interest to value and look up to white men. So it's funny they would tell a story where it's like, here's another story of another time a white man did something good. It's not even about Charlie though. It was just a rare moment in seminary where at the end of the class, it was like the end of the quarter. So it was the final class, last hour of the class. And he just said, it's tradition in my classes to spend the last hour listening to the experiences of the women. So we want to hear from you. Like, what has your seminary experience been like? And the men don't get to talk. And it was just crazy. Like, I started off thinking, what's to be said? I was like skeptical. I mean, this was like maybe 8 years ago, so I'm a slightly more evolved now. I wasn't like disinterested. I was very curious.
Yeah, no,
but I was like, this isn't gonna fill an hour, and it easily filled an hour.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Probably, I'm assuming there was about 40 people in the class, and probably 15 of them were women probably, and just like heartache after heartache story, tears, and just more tears of just how hard it was to even apply to somebody, how they don't feel like they have a voice, how they feel like they have a place, how they've been mistreated, how nobody listens. And we just sat there like, it was like holy ground, you know, and listened to these stories. I've never experienced something like that in the seminary world. But think about if we did that more.
Yeah.
And it can't be, again, it's the bare minimum, honestly. It's this sweet moment where, like, you know, how convenient that I got to hear these stories to a certain extent.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you think about. I didn't know we'd be talking about this. This is so interesting. I just think it makes you, I don't know, as people, as a person who can live in like a very like life that can be surrounded by a lot of similar voices to mine. I don't want to stop asking myself the question of like, who's not at this table for like discussions, and like whose voice am I not considering? You know, I think that voice is, we have a voice, and like our voice has a space and is valid, but so does everybody else. And their voice, like, we need every voice to sing.
Okay, so this next part about voices is also wild. Everything we're talking about today
Everything
is wild.
will be
It's like I feel
wild.
like we're trying to like tame a wild animal. The wild animal is this voice, concept of voice.
The concept
quotes.
of voice, yeah.
It's running around, and we're trying to jump on it and be like, trying to get a sense of it.
I tried to research it and kind of couldn't. I just had to think about it.
So here's what I'll say, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, great.
So, Reuven, our friend, someday, it was like, what if it's an imaginary friend? What if someday all our listeners will be like, he's not even a real person, Reuven. We promise Reuven's real. Reuven and I subscribe to a stream of philosophy that you'd call continental philosophy. Now, I have a brother who's a professor at Gonzaga now. He started teaching this week.
Shout out.
Shane.
A listener.
He would consider himself, and correct me if I'm wrong, Shane, an analytic philosopher. And both are very interesting and important. The work that Shane does in the world is so important. I subscribe to continental philosophy. So they're kind of different streams.
What's the difference?
I don't even want to pretend to give an official description of what the differences are. But here is... I was not prepared for this. Now I'm worried about my brother because he'll be listening to me like, that's not how you describe it. Even Reuven. Now I'm caught in between these two voices who are very passionate about these topics.
How would you, to your best of your knowledge?
The difference is essentially analytic philosophy would think of truth and philosophy and the exercise of what they do as essentially figuring out and boiling down truth to its essence through proofs. It's almost like math. It's like an analytic philosopher starts with a statement or two and then works to prove the statements. And essentially, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, friends and Shane, now you've got that wrapped up. You've done the work of proving the point, and we've got that figured out, and I'll move on to the next thing. And essentially the mindset is like, we can figure these things out as humans. Continental philosophy is essentially saying, it's almost like intellectual soup. Like none of this will ever get figured out. The best thing that we can do is put voice to it and try to express this world in some way. And words and art and all of that is appropriate, but to think that we could ever truly figure it out and say something definitive is scandalous to the continental philosopher. Like, you know, we're not even trying to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say something about voice to me that is rooted in sort of a continental philosophy mindset. So people, Reuven knows like a continental philosopher type that we love is Derrida. Another guy that I love is Gadamer. I have a website or a blog called Fusion of Horizons, which is inspired by Gadamer. Oh. And he wrote a book called Truth and Method. He's like my life hero. Big sigh. So all that, here's a preliminary thing to say this about voice. What I want to say is we are all rooted in a cultural location. So if you picture like a GPS Apple map or whatever, you hit the pin. We are all rooted in a cultural location. So it's the place we were born, it's the family we were raised in, it's the city, it's the beliefs, it's the mythology. So for example, I was raised in a white Christian household, which is beautiful and wonderful in its own way. And my mythology and my stories and everything that I heard was C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien and the Bible and Christianity and living in Kent, Washington, and having my family sort of doubling down on their Scottish roots, even though I had other roots. I have Native American roots, Cherokee Indian. I didn't hear much about that. I heard a lot about Scottish roots. So I have a lot of that. This gives me what you call like a cultural location. So it invalidates and validates everything I say at the same time. It invalidates in the sense that it's limited. So I'm only able to talk about truth and reality through my cultural lens. And it also validates it in the sense that that's an important lens. So that's how we should treat everybody. And if everybody had that sort of mentality, it's like you come at every situation with this beautiful balance of confidence and humility. Like my voice is important, but everybody's voice is important. Yeah. And everybody is approaching this world through their own cultural. The buzz phrase is cultural location. That's what I want everybody to hear.
The buzz phrase.
Cultural location. So I think the continental philosopher, and Shane, comment on our Instagram. I'll give you a chance. The analytic philosopher says...
You've got a challenge. You've got a comment.
From my perspective, says, screw cultural location. Truth is truth. We don't need to take that into account.
But that's part of the truth.
That's
Perspective is true.
That's what I believe.
Oh, the analytical.
But there's actually analytic philosophy is probably more of a 5 way to think about things. There's sort of this getting out of all of that stuff or a belief that you can get out of it and look at things from an objective standpoint. What I believe that misses is what we call in heavy quotes objectivity is will always be informed by our cultural location, whether we like to admit it or not.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of...
An analytic philosopher treated as math.
It seems obvious to me that we're always informed by it. But I think
Shane
we're also...
and friends, I'm sure you take this into account. And talking to my brother is the easiest thing to do. It's not like he's like, I have one definition of truth. He's so curious. Yeah. So I don't think analytic philosophers are like these... pretentious people that only view they just approach things in a different way. I think they approach a conversation thinking we'll eventually get to the bottom of this. And I think
well, that just makes me think of how I think a lot of people sometimes approach like religion or spirituality or like trying to understand the divine. Is that at the end of the day I'll somehow have figured this out and then I'll like no.
That's how I did it growing up.
I know, I did too. And then you realize very quickly is probably not the right, but you realize that that's actually quite the opposite of what you should be. Like there's no knowability. And honestly, getting to the bottom of something is a little boring because at the end of the day, you've gotten to the bottom of something and then you're done.
Yeah, I think honestly, the first thing that comes to my brain is like the way we treat TV and movies. Like, you guys, someday we'll have Reuven on the show. Everybody knows Reuven and I are diehard fans of David Lynch and Twin Peaks. And so if anybody ever watched the newest season of Twin Peaks, it's called Twin Peaks The Return. Go Google Twin Peaks. I'm not going to explain it right now. That's a waste of time.
I can't watch it. It's too intense for me.
I've forbidden Macy.
I'm not forbidden, but it's pretty...
I'm not forbidden. Let's just make that clear.
It's pretty obvious that based on my prior TV problems. It's not a show for me.
Did Ruben ever show you any part of like episode 8?
No.
Okay, well maybe I'll show you. But David Lynch and his art and his films and Twin Peaks: The Return in particular is a actually beautiful sort of creation of continental philosophy. I don't know if David Lynch would ever even understand or know that. He doesn't talk about it, but there is no reference point. There is no central meaning. There's no consistent story arc, and it ends in absolute chaos. And I think David Lynch's point is sort of a continental philosophy spirit, is like, look, to think that I'm going to wrap this up for you and that's how life works.
Right.
And it sounds so hoity-toity art, but it's just true. You know, it ends in a continental philosophy way. Like it ends
like with dissonance.
It ends with dissonance, but also like it's hard to describe unless you know the show, spinning you back out into oblivion and unknowing, and you're like, what? That's how it ended? You know, like basically Twin Peaks fans waited for 25 years for the return of Twin Peaks, and they assumed they were going to get some answers. And if anything, he brought you to the second to last episode of Twin Peaks: The Return, gave you answers. And then in the most frustrating and beautiful way, the finale unraveled all those answers and left you confused again.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I think maybe there's a false promise in this world that we're going to be given answers, or and if we can embrace it, we don't get answers. I don't even know how this relates to voice. I have some thoughts.
I don't know if it does.
I want to say to everybody and myself that our cultural location gives us 100% validation, and at the same time limits us entirely. And
we're limited by our perspectives, and yet we see the world through them.
And I want to say, how can everybody see? I hope so, and I hope I'm seeing it as I'm talking. How essential everyone's voice is. It's so essential. I mean, especially if we're thinking about in terms of like these, what we were saying about women and people whose voices aren't typically heard. Yeah. Cultures whose voices have been lost.
Yeah, and I think that there's something that's, well, there seems to be a fear amongst people of like, with this whole idea of like, specifically like white fragility, as we're continuing to talk about voice, of like, oh no, giving other people a voice, like, am I going to lose my voice in the midst of this? And like,
yeah.
And there's this huge fear, but I think that something that is essential to bringing forward everyone's voices and just like recognizing that everyone has a voice is that we all gain from that. Like everyone wins when we can invite everyone's voice into the room and like when we can hear other perspectives and like we're able to be more clear of what we're solving and who we're helping and how we're helping when voices are actually being validated
and how we're failing.
Yeah, like it's I don't know. It's just, this is bringing up a lot of like just heavy thoughts of just like how important it is that in our daily, like in our lives, we're integrating like moments where we can invite people into conversations. I don't know how well I'm doing that.
And it seems that sort of, and this is, I think, again, like the heart of our podcast. Like it seems like an engagement with art, is another opportunity to do that.
Can we talk about voice as in like certain people voices?
Are you going to talk about Tyler Joseph?
Were you asking that seriously or jokingly?
Jokingly, but I'm also genuinely interested.
I am going to be talking about Tyler Joseph.
Okay. Now I'm faking surprise.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking
Tyler
about
Joseph, if for some reason you're listening for the first time, is the lead singer of 21 Pilots.
Yeah, so he's the lead singer of 21 Pilots, and he is, in my opinion, so it's Tyler Joseph and Josh Dunn who are a part of this band, 21 Pilots. They are both voices of the band. They really are.
Okay.
And honestly, so are we. We are 21 Pilots, and so are you. That's like their catchphrase. But I would like to specifically talk about Tyler Joseph's specific
Having
voice.
said that.
Having that preface. The voice.
Fans, Josh Dunn, thank you. We're going to talk about Tyler Joseph now.
He just has such a distinctive voice. And voice in like every sense of the word. Like he has a very distinctive singing / talking / rapping voice. Like I could recognize it within the first word he says, which is very cool and unique to him. And I think that's partially why he's famous. But it's one of the reasons. But he has such a voice throughout.
Gosh, I'm getting dings.
I know. Sorry. There's a lot of distracting noises. He has such a clear voice throughout all of his music and a perspective. And like part of his message is like validating his own voice and like validating everyone else's voices. It's like part of what his message is. So I love that. My first note about Tyler Joseph. The second note that I was just thinking about, which is so interesting in terms of voice, is in Blurry Face, this album that came out in 2015, is when he like really gets into like manipulating his voice musically. And I think that's where he like really starts to play with the concept of voice, because you hear his voice in a ton of the songs, and then you hear this voice of Blurry Face, which is like a concept. I don't know what it is now in terms of Trench and all that comes with that. But it's his own voice, but it's his voice manipulated and telling him different things. But it's coming from within as well. So it's like this idea of we have our voice, but then we also kind of have voices within our own voice. Like we have voices in our head.
Voices in our head. That's a totally different
It's a totally different topic.
Yeah.
But it's like...
Wow.
That is also a thing that's affecting our voice, is that there's what we say with our voice isn't always necessarily the voice that we would want to express.
That is heavy. Yikes, yikes, yikes. What would you want to say about his like neck tattoo ink art thing?
Well, I would want to say a few things. First of all, it's great. So if you didn't know, Tyler wears like black paint and black paint on his neck and black paint on his hands. And he's only talked about it in like 1 or 2 interviews, but it's like everybody knows this. He wears
Everybody knows this. Anybody that's a 21 Pilots fan.
It represents specifically, so his hands is what he creates, like his hands and his voice really is what he creates music out of and creates some of the most intimate things. And Tyler also is, as much as he is a songwriter and a singer, he is also like a spoken word artist, which in itself could be a whole thing about voice and how saying spoken word and saying poetry gives it so much voice. But anyways, he's most proud of the things that he produces with his voice and with his hands, and yet he's also most insecure about them. And so they're the places where Blurry Face, that voice, kind of takes hold.
And like stifles him.
And like suffocates. Yes, he talks about it like as a suffocating like experience, which, you know.
That's dark.
It's dark, but I think it's beautiful imagery. And I think a little bit truth-telling.
Poignant imagery.
I think it.
Why is this troubling imagery?
It's troubling, but I think it's truth-telling.
You know, I had all these names down: Kanye, 21 Pilots, Kendrick, artists we love, Voice, Gianna Newsom, Rebecca Sugar, the creator of Steven Universe.
I love that you put Rebecca Sugar.
And I don't think we have time to talk about all these people. I think we can just talk about Tyler Joseph and proving the point of the sense of like, Well,
I think we can just talk about Taylor Joseph.
let me. Yeah, let's for the rest of the time. We're gonna end by talking a little bit about what it means to us personally.
Okay, yeah.
And then we got to wrap it up.
Yeah, we're probably over time.
So obviously Tyler Joseph has a cultural location.
He does.
And in addition to that, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that he's dealt with depression.
He has.
So that's another location of sorts. I don't want to say cultural, but like it's a lens through which his voice gets used.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what's so interesting. Think about perspective, just the concept, but then again, the literal voice, your vocal cords, getting pushed out through these experiences and this perspective and this lens. And that's what makes it so important and valid.
Yeah.
And thank God Tyler Joseph has found his voice, but there needs to be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of more Tyler Josephs. You know, and I think that's what you're saying about him that's so great, is like, it's not about him. He wants to empower others.
Well, yeah, and I think what makes his voice so, like, why he has so many fans is that he really is just truth, like, telling from within. He really just, like, lets it out, and it feels very authentic to himself and to his own voice. It doesn't seem like it's trying to appease anyone or any audience or fit any certain standards. It's his own unique voice.
The reason I think we even wanted to talk about this topic is this idea of imperfection.
Yes.
In music.
Yes.
Specifically. And thinking about Kanye, but then thinking about voice, like Macy was like posting pictures on her Instagram of like very flawed images of herself and like a sad face, a moment when she's like crying, and she posted it as like her like profile picture, you know. And then we were talking about Kanye, and there's something wonderful and artistic and true about making himself sound bad and distorted, and that's his real voice. You know, in quotes, but like not in quotes. I don't know if we want to get into that, but like,
well, just like briefly, like point out, like, so part of the listening party was the idea of the human voice and it being okay that it just being the human voice playing and it not sounding the way it's supposed to sound, but it being your unique voice. So if you listen to the listening party,
Macy made something called the listening party. Listening party for your ears. It's on our feed.
It's on our feed. If you
sounded like we hosted a listening party or something.
Oh yeah, sorry. It's a bonus episode thing. And throughout it, there's like this one line that everyone sings, and it's all these different voices. And I think unconsciously and consciously on some level, I really wanted to emphasize that like each person singing it brought their own way of singing it, and that like enhanced it, that made it wholer and richer, and it made the line have more meaning the more voices sang it in their own way.
Yeah, and for your purposes, it wasn't important that they like sang on key.
No. Yeah. And people kept being like, I'm not a good singer, and I'm like, great, you are a good singer actually. Like you're just gonna sing the way you sing, which is good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like there's not such thing as being a good singer, really. I mean,
if you think about this idea of like The Voice or American Idol and these things that we've done to hopefully we're gonna hear some sound some way. The Voice. We're not trained as a society to appreciate somebody's voice in terms of like, here's somebody that's off key. And they're singing, and they're telling their truth through song. You have something to say.
Well, I was just going to add that I went to an Episcopal service recently, and the sister, or the priest, I think sister, she, like, they do, like, singing scripture, you know? And their voices are, like, no matter who you are, it doesn't matter if you are born into a good singing voice or not. That's a part of your like role, is singing in front of this group and leading everyone in song. And it doesn't matter if your voice is like angelic. That's not the point of it, you know?
Gold.
The point is just to sing and invite people into it and like it be your own voice.
I love that.
So I was inspired by that actually.
Another thing, I want to mention this, and it will be a placeholder because maybe someday we'll do a whole we'll do a part 2, voice part 2. I think all these episodes are placeholders.
Boys Part 2.
It's like a Steven Universe placeholder, Enneagram placeholder, Kanye placeholder, TOP placeholder. 3 people. Sorry, they're all white men. Sorry.
He's a white male who is
a white male
surrounded by white men.
Yes.
It's the way it works, everybody.
I know, it's hard.
Get out of your zones.
Yeah, sorry. So we have Bob Dylan, Tom Waits, and Leonard Cohen.
Okay.
These are all 3 famous white rock star types that have aged and embraced their changing voices.
Oh.
Yeah. So to most people, Tom Waits' voice sounds like crap. Mm-hmm. It's gravelly and raspy and weird.
When I'm gone, roll my vertebrae out like dice. Let my skull be a home for the mice. Let me bleach like the bones on the beach. I'll be hard like a pit from a peach. Now the ground has a brand. Now the hound has a ranch. The old dress is just junk.
That's his voice. That's his literal voice, and it's his current perspective. And Bob Dylan sounds weird. Bob Dylan has always sounded weird. And Leonard Cohen actually is the biggest transformation because he doesn't sound at all like he did. And to a certain extent, Bob Dylan and Tom Waits have always sounded weird. But Leonard Cohen especially just got really deep, really strange in a way that wouldn't be classically appealing.
If you are the dealer, I'm out of the game. If you are the healer, means I'm broken and lame. If thine is the glory, then mine must be the shame. You want it darker, we kill the flame.
But I love. I
think
as
you've
a
showed
listener,
me him.
probably that like I'm experiencing this man's aged voice, and he's using it. And that's reality, and his continuing perspective. Like he's writing songs that represent who he is now from his lens. So it's like that voice, but his literal, in heavy quotes, strange voice. Most people are like, let's change it. Let's listen to something else. You know, but this is his voice. And there's something profound about listening to it. In conclusion, I think Macy and I both wanted to share a little bit about like where we're at with our own voices. Do you want to say anything about that? What like in terms of what expressing your own voice in the world, but also maybe through this podcast?
Sure, I can say a few things about that.
Okay.
First of all, the podcast has on some level both validated and invalidated my voice, similar to how the like, what's it called? What was that catchphrase?
Cultural location.
Cultural location. Because on some level, it's like, well, there's your voice. It's recorded. It's out there. Like, it's that it literally is my voice being put out there. But I think, and that's like cool on some level. But I think there's also some level of it being like me getting all weird and existential and being like, oh, what is that besides just sound bites that's out in the world? And like, what does your voice have to do? And like, why would your voice make for like a podcast host? And I go crazy existential.
Oh, come on. Okay. That makes me think you have to be a 4-wing 5. There's no 7 in those thoughts. And there's actually no 4 in those thoughts.
What do you mean?
That is really hyper overthinking. It's my understanding that 4s really go into their deep emotions. That's the hallmark of a 4.
Right.
The 5 is thinking, asking all those questions, never-ending questions.
I guess that's true, but I think these
7s don't do that.
These questions are about what is this meaningful enough? But okay, so it's invalidated and invalidated, but then I think I come around. I've come around basically around the bend of the existential crisis, and I'm like, well, I have a voice. I'm putting it out there, putting the frequency out there. Might as well try.
Mm-hmm.
Who cares? I'm using my voice on some level. Like,
Absolutely.
I think it's better to use my voice than not and to trust it. And I think that this is fun and wholesome. So it's helped me. Also, you guys, doing ASMR has just given me so much more trust in my voice.
I wanted you to mention.
There's something about it where when I'm doing ASMR, I literally am focusing first of all on my voice and the way it sounds and like being very intentional about the actual way my voice is going to sound and be received by other people. But it also is, I'm essentially putting it out there to no one. And it's this like my voice being put into the abyss and like seeing what catches. And I'm kind of like into it just being out there and at least just like trusting that like, well, I put it out there. And I'm pretty like myself on ASMR. I'm probably my most like relaxed.
Yeah, it's admirable. You seem very comfortable.
It's so fun.
Do
you have thoughts on voice? Your own voice?
Yeah. I mean, I think the podcast is an opportunity to, and this is probably the episode where it's most proven of like, if I'm thinking about writing a blog post or coming up with a talk or doing a sermon, these are the venues that I typically use my voice in heavy quotes. I am doing a lot of editing and thinking and tailoring and fitting in and I think the podcast, especially like on a night like tonight, it's more of this free form thinking. There's still some inner editing, but it's mostly just saying, I think the philosophy of the podcast in the background for me, and I think probably for you too, is this permission thing. Like we're just going to talk and maybe someday we'll find an audience. I know people are listening to a certain extent, but like a broad audience, or not even like thinking of currently our core listeners, I'm sure are our friends and family, which is so nice. That's so sweet and nice. And I also think to a certain extent, our friends and family actually aren't our core listeners.
Right.
There are some sort of, again, in heavy quotes, weirdos, people that just like love talking endlessly about whatever topic and also just like the things we like. Steven Universe, ASMR, Kanye West, 21 Pilots, and just sort of have this boundless, endless curiosity and aren't like, I can't believe you did a 2-hour episode.
Yeah,
you know?
There's people out there who probably would prefer
1 or 2 hour episode,
like really long 2-hour episodes, and there's a lot of people who would probably prefer.
And that's fine. We're trying to attract people that want a 2-hour episode. I do. Yeah. If there's that's one of the things I've been saying is like, if I'm a fan of a podcast, I'm fine with a 2-hour episode. So I think there's I think one of the reasons Macy and you and I started a podcast is that we noticed a vibe in our daily interactions that was something about this idea that a topic could start and we could go forever.
Right.
So let's harness that and capture it and use it. So
and I think
we could keep going on voice. That happens every week. It's
know.
This is nothing.
I also think that part of our reason for doing this was that we validated each other's voices. I think that we both, first of all, we just got along well, and that it helps, I think. But I think that we both saw each other's voices as having a unique perspective that probably was good for each other to hear. It's probably helpful for me to get some I don't know, more experienced.
What we really need in this world right now is a white Queen Anne male voice. It's really essential.
It's hard for me to fully.
I don't know. I don't think it's about that. I don't think it's about
no.
Okay, I mean Macy, this is interesting. This past week, Macy hasn't been in the office because she doesn't work at our church anymore. She works at this other place.
Coolest preschool ever.
And Rebecca, shout out Rebecca, did this great devotional where she shared, and might be a great way to wrap up. And I wish I had the actual quote in front of me, but you'll get the point. Rebecca, the new high school intern at our church, led devotions. And she brought a passage from C.S. Lewis from his book, The Four Loves, which I love. And The Four Loves is sort of a meditation on the different types of loves and relationships that we experience in our life. If you're familiar with that book, it's like sort of these, I think, Latin definitions of these core elements of love, like eros and agape and stuff like that. And this passage said, so they were meditating on, he was reflecting on this idea of when someone dies, part of us dies. Now that sounds very standard. We all can agree with that. But to think about this idea that like we all draw out something completely unique in the other person. So I draw something unique out of you. You draw something unique out of me. Matthew draws something unique out of me.
Oh,
my wife,
yeah.
Marissa. And so when Marissa dies, part of me will die. And you'll never see that side of me again. And so I don't even think it's like this bonding thing. Like if you look at the podcast through that lens, or not bonding. It's not like you need this perspective in your life.
No.
You know, you need the Scott middle class white Queen Anne man's perspective. It's more of just the vibe. Like I think you bring something out of me that I like, and I like to think I bring something out of you that you like.
Yeah.
And that's the core of it.
My mind is just blown when you think about that, and you times that by like the amount of like, I'm me, Macy, Matthew sitting next to me, Matthew, and now Matthew plus Macy is the relationship, and now we're not just Macy as an individual or Matthew as an individual, we're now a relationship. But then you're here, and what does that mean? You multiply that. It's kind of wild. Fusion.
It is wild, and it's really sweet. And I think in terms of voice and in terms of no small thing, there has been one of my big buzzwords is permission. I don't feel as crazy when I'm around you when my brain just keeps going.
Yeah. We just give permission for just to say all the free thoughts and know that they're just free and open in their thoughts and our voices, and that doesn't mean they're solidified. Like,
you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Your perspective and opinion and thought will change, but you have permission to say it.
I think that if we held people's thoughts more lightly and with ease, we would probably be a little less scared of everyone's voice too.
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. Well, personally, I feel invited to be more sort of ideation, just thinking out loud when I'm around you, and maybe you feel the same, but like then we can invite listeners, like, go ahead and go on your thought train. Go on the thought train. Like, we're giving you permission to do that. We are here for it.
Thought train.
We like it. We're not. It's not even like we're patient for it. We celebrate it. We like it. We like the thought train. We're not like, oh, we've been working on this for years. We can really tolerate the thought train.
Yeah.
We don't tolerate it. We like it.
Yeah.
And
Rants.
maybe you'll do that more with people in your life. You know.
Yeah.
Voice.
Trust your voice. Trust that your voice is valid and that what you have to say is worth saying, and that your own perspective on things and what the way you experience the world is a valid way of experiencing the world. And your reflections on that have meaning, and the world loses something without your voice.
That's a good way to end.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.